I have a daughter who lives in Chicago, and she came to visit us with her family. And when she left, she called me and said, "Dad, there's something wrong with Mom."
We're sitting on our porch, and my husband said, "Am I dying?" I said, "You're not dying today." And he said, "What am I supposed to do?"
You know, I remember seeing fear in his eyes.
She looked to him when she couldn't remember something, and so for a long time, I guess maybe we didn't notice that there was as big of an issue as there was.
It is a vicious, vile, and unforgiving disease.
When you get that news and this transformation, this change that occurs, you're lost.
You get diagnosed with something that is life-altering. We become very clear on what is important.
It could have been so many things, and they looked. And in the end, it was early onset Alzheimer's dementia at the age of 50.
Eventually was discovered to be Alzheimer's. My name is Shirley Marquez. I was diagnosed officially this last February of 2022 with a dual diagnosis. The first was primary progressive aphasia, and the secondary was Alzheimer's. Before we had kind of a preliminary screenings that Christmas, really, I thought I was going to die. But then the more that I found out, then I felt, well, I have time. I was hesitant to share with people. With family, it was very easy. But when it came to many other people that I had as friends, it was very hard for me to make that decision. I always thought that it was because they would treat me differently, that it would be a change. And somebody asked me the question, why?
My name is Alan Robertson, and in April of 2021, I was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia disease.
I'm Cindy Robertson. I am Alan's wife of 42 years first, and his caregiver second.
The earliest signs that I noticed with my situation was I began to see things in the corner of my eye, my periphery, and I called it a mouse, because that's what it looked like, a little black mouse. And I thought there was just something wrong with my eyes. We reached out to our primary care provider, and she suggested we consult with neurology right away. When they gave me the diagnosis, it caught me way off guard. Cindy and I are on the phone together as I'm driving, and we're in tears. You know, we don't really know how to process this news yet. All I could think of was get home to her. I knew that with her was my place of safety, my place of comfort.
He came home with a packet full of information. In the packet was phone calls to the social worker, phone calls to the disease center, the support groups, contacting a lawyer, getting your affairs in order. I felt like I was drowning. Where do we go next? And it was the social worker that contacted us and said, here's your next step. Let's make a list. This is what you need to do. That was our lifesaver, that I was able to come up above and tread water, breathe a little bit, and go, okay, now I have something concrete that I feel like I can go do.
Sometimes you wake up in the morning and you just realize you're going to have a bad day. And it's humbling.
You think, oh, I have control over those? No, there is no control over Lewy body. It comes and goes, and that's probably one of the hardest things with Lewy body is that there is no consistency.
Lewy body is interesting. Lewy will decide when Lewy wants to show up.
This is a not ending journey until it's done. I will be learning things until this journey's over.
My name's Robert Garcia. My experience with Alzheimer's has been with my wife, who passed away approximately 8 months ago. She suffered with Alzheimer's for a little over 8 years. Each year, there's a little bit of change. In some people, the change comes rapidly. In some people, it doesn't. It's a difficult situation to sit back and see the person that you love going away. You never know how long it's going to last, and you never know who it's going to affect. I felt reluctant to go and find out what somebody else's problems were. I knew what my problems were, and I didn't want to go hear about what I might be facing in the near future. I was trying to shield myself. In the long run, you're going to need that help. Whether it's during the process of the illness or after the illness has shown its deadly effect, you're going to need someone. You're going to need someone to talk to. You're going to need someone to help you, and don't be afraid to accept help. I'm a little bit reluctant sometimes to accept help, but it's definitely what's needed. Y lo que les quiero decir es posible que ya vamos a acabar un poquito aquí, pero lo que les quiero decir es que no dejen que la ayuda que alguien les quiere dar, no por favor, no nieguen y no la acepten. Esta ayuda que les ofrece la familia, los médicos o los Alzheimer's, es muy importante porque les va a ayudar a poder entender lo que ha pasado. Y yo no era muy pronto para querer ayuda, pero en tiempo la acepté todo.
My name is Elaine Bellardo, and I was married to Jose Bellardo for 29 years, and I was his caregiver after he was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's dementia. So he always celebrated our anniversaries, but not in small ways. They were always really large. So he'd plan something huge and grand. And then on our 20th anniversary, I said, I have something for you. And he's like, what? I said, it's a present. And he said, a present for me? Why? And I said, it's our 20th anniversary. And he fell to his knees crying, bereft, just overcome. And he said, I would never, ever, ever forget. I don't know how I forgot. That was the first big symptom of anything going wrong with my husband. Because he was so young, they were willing to look for everything that it could possibly be. And in the end, it was early onset Alzheimer's dementia at the age of 50. Everything that we had hoped and planned and dreamed for the future was upended. The first time I walked into the support group, I was a stew of emotions. Jose attended a support group for people that were living with dementia. They told us it was okay to ask why, it was okay to be angry, and they gave us freedom to have whatever expression that we needed to have when we received the diagnosis. And a social worker at our support group was one of the first people that ever used the word, "there is hope." And that changed the trajectory of our thought. It changed how we were going to pursue living with this adversity. You can live with the adversity.
I'm Michelle Niedens. I am a clinical social worker and the director of the Cognitive Care Network at KU, Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. I grew up in a small community in Parsons, Kansas. When I got married, I wanted to come home and get married in my hometown church. And I didn't know the new pastor. I wanted the retired pastor to do the ceremony. His wife was very clear with me. She didn't know if he could do it. There was never the word Alzheimer's used, but that was what was going on. And I said, I don't care if the service is messed up. You and I are going to do this. And he did it perfectly. I remember a woman who, she really didn't have family. There again, giver, volunteer, active in the community. And she would say, you know, I get so lonely here. This woman that was out in the community doing for everyone else, and she spent the majority of her time alone. Forgetful, placed, I'm sure, prematurely, because she did not have enough support. Why did we not know? Why could we not talk about it? You know, there are these small communities with all these really hero of people that live in them, giving and doing for the community. We should know, and we should be there. I think about one other person. His wife passed away with Alzheimer's disease. He was a community volunteer. He was well known, well loved in the community, and he decided he was going to be open. They talked about it. He created a support group in his little small community. He was active in bringing education about Alzheimer's disease to his community. His openness made a difference in that community. People looked at him and said, if he can be open about it, so can I.
I realized that something was dramatically wrong with my grandmother, and my mom put pretty much her whole life into my grandmother. It was my first moment of really understanding selflessness and also understanding the viciousness of Alzheimer's. What she was doing and taking care of her mom, there could be no cost associated with it. You know, when you do something like that, you're doing it out of love, pure, undistilled, dripping love. And Alzheimer's demands, in fact, that loved ones embrace them even under those very abnormal circumstances.
I'm Dr. Scott Webb, and I'm a family practice physician here at Clara Barton Hospital in Hoisington, Kansas.
My name is Macy Ingham, and I am a nurse manager at Clara Barton Medical Clinics in Hoisington, Kansas.
I specifically gravitated towards interest in dementia and memory disorders because that's such a common thing. For one, I think you have to have that skill set to be able to take care of that population. But I also have had that in my own experience with my mother had dementia, and I just knew what effects that had on the family. At Clara Barton here, we have set up kind of special program with using our Medicare wellness exams to screen for dementia. Oftentimes when family members come to us with memory problems, they don't want to really approach the patient that's experiencing them. It's kind of a difficult conversation to have. And so by doing it as part of our normal screening for wellness, it's made it much easier, I think, for our patients and also family to kind of start to address these issues.
It's very easy to feel like there's no resources. It's very easy to feel like you're alone in this. Even though we don't have an exact answer to the problem yet, we have resources, we have ways to help. We have area on aging, we have, people that can come just sit with your loved one while you go to the grocery store. We have our support group, which we can learn so much just from other people's stories.
A lot of times people just don't know what to expect, and so a big part of helping with that is education.
We have so much to learn from people at all stages of dementia, people who in the beginning and early stages are very fearful of what to come. You see them, months later, and they are just absolutely doing such a great job. And they've learned so much, they've done the research, and so it's really neat for me to see the family unit grow with this diagnosis and not just the patient.
Think about really any chronic disease, the risk of depression is a lot higher, particularly when people come to a disease like this that doesn't have an easy, quick fix.
So oftentimes in our support group, we hear family members say like the behaviors have increased, or they're just not acting themselves, or they're not talking as much. And we always want to relate that back to the dementia diagnosis, when a lot of times, if we treat the underlying depression, those behaviors get a lot better.
We need to be very proactive as healthcare providers to screen for that. So again, that's a group effort. Everybody that's seeing that patient kind of being on the lookout for it.
I'm Jeffrey Burns, and I co-direct the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center.
I'm Ryan Townley. I'm one of the principal investigators at the Alzheimer's Center, and I'm our memory clinic medical director and the director of our fellowship. We know that patients can have these changes going on for 10 and up to 20 years before they get symptoms, and that's a major time window we've been missing in this disease. So if you really think of like where cancer is, right, early detection is what we aim for.
The more we educate the community in general, the better outcomes we're going to have.
It's important for people to be proactive and, if there are changes, address them.
Don't be afraid to reach out to the doctor. Don't be afraid to have a conversation with your family.
Identify it, name it, go after it.
Before we had evidence of biomarkers, we were relying purely on changes in symptoms, and oftentimes patients were getting diagnosed much later. And I think we really moved up that window as far as diagnosis to try to get patients enrolled in studies sooner before more changes in the brain have happened.
If you suspect even a little bit that your loved one is slipping, take them to the doctor, and don't be afraid to bring it up in conversation around them, because having them upset with you for an afternoon is much better than waiting, 4 years down the road for when it's really bad.
Primary care docs are in a great position to be screening people and diagnosing early, but we need those diagnostics, and we need, the education programs, and we need the network to actually get those techniques, into practice.
Some sort of early detection system is going to be important for this process, and that can include better screening tools from cognitive testing, but also, we recommend certain questionnaires with patient caregivers that will at least tell us is something going on that we might not be detecting at our normal visits.
We have to solve the problem of access to, a good diagnosis and to, proper treatment. We're developing primary care provider networks across the state of Kansas and across the region. But the next 5 to 10 years are going to bring a bunch of changes and improvements in how we diagnose, and, we're very hopeful how we treat will change.
I was beginning to see things that I was doing in the community. For example, my neighbor that I've known for 5 years walking down the street, I couldn't remember her name. So I made the decision that I was just going to put it out there. Let's see what that does by telling people does that educate? If it educated one person, it was worth it. And all of a sudden, I found when I put it out there that I had this issue, it began to educate a lot of people. And a lot of people were then not afraid to come and ask me about it.
The more open people can be, the better, but also realizing there's a huge stigma involved, right, with a diagnosis. And I think that's really as much a societal problem. We have to be more open about discussing these things.
The shame and stigma associated with this disease, that has to go. That it will block you from enjoying the moments that you do have.
I do think it's really important people don't hide it. They don't need to hide it.
Having an open conversation, families kind of stepping forward and just kind of confronting that, it's just like any other illness.
We have to be open and honest, and we have to be willing to share things that are difficult to share.
There's no reason to feel embarrassed. There's no reason to feel ostracized. It affects everybody, in some form or another, whether that's your family member, whether it's a patient, whether it's you, whether it's your parent. It's going to affect all of us at some point.
The bottom line is, it doesn't matter what people think. It matters that we still operate together as a community.
We see benefit when there's a good social support system around an individual.
Isn't that better than just hiding it and thinking that something is horribly wrong and that you're living in this shame? Isn't it better to address it so we don't leave people in these states of fear and trepidation?
It's worth telling others. It's worth being open about a diagnosis and recognizing there's a problem and communicating that with your family.
When someone gets diagnosed with something like Alzheimer's or other dementias, there is a whole bunch of questions. And if those questions do not get answered, it impacts quality of life.
The more we can address it head on and be proactive, and part of that can be, communicating with your family, being open.
I discovered that the people that I was not sharing with were my friends, but they were very sympathetic, very wonderful group to be with. And I thought that's not really the reason that I don't want to share it with. It was, I didn't know how to start. That kind of freed me from the worry that something was going to change. And then now I had to decide how I was going to share it. It really made me free. I could choose the way I wanted to share that. So it's easy now. It's been a journey to get to that point. It just freed me and just makes my life a lot lighter since then.
Activities and engagement should not be an afterthought. It is life. So those activities are central. Keeping people engaged and active is important.
I wish there were better medicines, but I do think there's a lot of things that we can do, the caregivers can do, that kind of set up a good schedule and include exercise, and that overall health is such a critical element because I think it makes a difference almost right away.
Be as healthy as possible, exercise, and anything challenging to the brain.
Anyone who is a support group, to me, was very important.
Going to support group is great because you're talking to people that understand. You're sharing with people that are on a similar journey. There's no two that are exactly alike, but there are some similarities, and you can get some helps from the people that are in your support group. I highly, highly encourage people to attend support groups.
It's so important to never pass up the opportunity for help.
The earlier you can get someone into a professional that can evaluate your situation, there's so many benefits to that.
This is a disease, that this is a situation that is as serious as cancer. It's as serious as heart attacks.
Early diagnosis is so important.
It's extremely important to diagnose early right now.
It's time that you could potentially be losing if you don't screen early.
It is important to know what type of dementia one is facing so that they can be prepared.
Getting that news early getting on those medications, finding out as much information as you can. Cindy said earlier, knowledge is power, and using that to set a direction for your life.
A lot of people butt heads against that fear and say, well, if I just don't go to the doctor, then they're not going to tell me that I have this problem. With early diagnosis and early detection, there's a better path that you can take.
If a physician says, why would I diagnose early if I can't tell this individual what their risk of progressing from mild cognitive impairment to dementia is, or if I don't have a drug that's going to stop that. I will not diagnose because we can't actively do anything about it, but that actively doing is also enrolling into research and finding those cures that then helps for getting cures for these early stages.
The drugs that are in development right now look to be most effective in the earlier we catch somebody with it. So if those drugs win and if those drugs come out, there's going to be an even greater reason to be vigilant about these changes and correctly diagnose when it's early Alzheimer's. So there's a lot of reasons to diagnose early now, but there will be a lot more, in the future. So 25 years from now, I imagine that we'll have prevention techniques and screening techniques, meaning we'll be able to apply tests widely across the population to detect risk.
The magic of science, which is really going at a very fast pace in this disease process, is going to be heavily directed at early stage. So it becomes more and more important for early detection.
We're doing the research, that cutting edge research, and participating in the new trials and developing new drugs so that we can move the field forward. The future will bring the ability to see these changes and then act on them before people develop memory problems.
There are some other perspective switches that have to happen. It's not only on the individual basis or the family basis, it's also on the healthcare basis, and that is that we move our perspective from just alone focused on disease modification, and we move it to functional preservation. If we can slow this down in any way possible, it's meaningful.
There's a lot of interceptions that you can do, especially with diet. I mean, it doesn't cure it, but it can stall it.
I'd like to say the first person cured of Alzheimer's will be in a clinical trial. The only way we will get new drugs is through clinical trials, and that is a community effort. Those trials aren't about us, they're about the community and about finding participants. This is about the patients and the people at risk, and we are not going to win this battle unless we all come together.
Many people will talk about all the worst aspects of the disease, and they go straight to the end. And the end just doesn't happen at the beginning. There are challenges, but there's challenges with every disease, with every adversity in life.
Lewy body does not define who I am as a person and she is as a caregiver.
There's a lot to change and a lot to improve upon.
You're not going to be able to do this journey without messing up. You're going to get frustrated. It requires more patience than a human being has.
There are a lot of things that can have direct benefit on people's lives if they just know they're available and they take advantage of them.
If we could make life even just a little bit easier for those affected by the disease and also their family, just patience.
Yes, I do have hope. I really do.
We've really improved our knowledge in complexity and in the timeline of the disease, and that gives me hope for moving forward.
As human beings, we need hope. It is an inextricable, inseparable part of who we are. We have to have hope. We cannot exist without it. We've never had a storm that lasted forever. We've never had a darkness that could not be pushed away. No matter how dark things are, the sun will rise in the morning. There's never been a day when the sun didn't rise.
What's brought me hope is the diversity of approaches that we're testing now. Seeing that diversity emerge in terms of how we're going after Alzheimer's has brought me a lot of hope. And I don't think it's a question of if we will cure Alzheimer's. I think it's a question of when.
I get to play in the deep waters every day with people who are expert swimmers, who understand what it means to live and thrive, and these resilient individuals that become more than they thought they could become. If you are a family member, if you are an adult child, an extended family, somebody from out of town, if you are a friend, if you are an acquaintance, we all need one another. And just because someone's diagnosed with something like dementia does not mean that they are any less of a friend or a person or a contributor. There is still reciprocity in relationships. People still have something to give. And it's all about how we feel. It's not about what we remember.
I would encourage people to celebrate everything. Every day is worthy of celebration.
It's not about what they did or did not do. It's not about the regrets. It's not about, gosh, this isn't what retirement should be. It's not about expectations. It is about the now. You have this moment to do something powerful.
We've learned that we can be open, and we can share, and we can be stronger than we thought we could be.
I think my husband learned about himself that you can have a disease, but the disease doesn't have you.
We're not going to just concede to this thing called Alzheimer's disease or Lewy body dementia or vascular dementia. We're going to put up a fight.
Together, we'll fight this.
Right.
Part of the exploration of this is to find some other pieces of yourself. It's not just to give up.
I'd like to be the first in line to get the pill that's going to take this away. But in the meantime, I'm going to do everything else.
If it helps one person get to a doctor, if it helps one med student decide I'm going to go into research to treat this condition and make it better for the person that comes behind us, the people that come behind us, what greater purpose that you could have in life?
There's a wonderful poem by Susan Fry-Bort that I think captures a whole bunch of important elements of this philosophical switch that can happen. The longing for things that you could not have. The yearning for places you were not destined to arrive. Wistful memories of what was never meant to be. Regret for not being who you thought you would become. These hallucinations of the soul are agonizing prisoners that must be pardoned and released. Clear the room. Open the door and let them leave. And in this space, you'll paint a glorious existence of being here with presence and commitment for what truly is a relevant and a meaningful life.
There's still living to be done, even with a diagnosis of dementia. There is living to be done, and it should be celebrated.
For as long as I have known, I long for a place like home, and I'll be sad to watch you go. But I know that's how we'll grow. I may have known Let's find our way out of the dark. I wish you well. It will be hard to let you go. I wish you well. It won't be easy, but we'll grow. For as long as I have known, I long for a place like home, and I'll be sad to watch you go. But I know that's how we'll grow. I may have known this from the start. Let's find our way out of the dark. I wish you